Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke Academy, and today we're going to dive into some news that was shared with me by an alert reader. Many hands make light work, as they say, and we have now a growing army of people out there keeping tabs on things and helping me out considerably. So I do a lot of research. I do have a lot of contacts throughout the world of finance, but it is the alert eyes of readers like you that uncover things and bring them to my attention that feed our conversation. So I want to put this in the right context, and part of that begins with my professional experience in the world of ERISA. So, what is ERISA, you might ask? ERISA is a body of law that governs the way things like 401k plans have to run. And that is my area of expertise. That is my profession. The company that I formed years ago, and kind of my claim to fame professionally, deals with ERISA consulting. So I've done this thing for years. I've crisscrossed the country, coaching and training other people, including treasurers and state legislatures and administrators of workplace retirement plans, etc., on how things like 401k plans have to run. So there are a number of different types of plans. We normally kind of talk about 401k because it's the most known publicly, it's the most talked about, but there are lots of other types and there are different ways of shaping and structuring them. Even the 401k, you may not know, has hundreds of different ways of creating and shaping it, and then different things that you look at in their administration make them function well. So, on that backdrop, I have worked on all kinds of plans all over the country. And as you may know, if you've been listening to prior conversations we've had at UnWoke Academy, I having that focus led to a group some years ago finding me. Actually, there have been many, many through the decades that have an interest in working close to or developing a product or service to align with workplace retirement plans. And when they do that, it's typical for them to find somebody like me to come in and consult for them, to explain to them the rules and help them to build it in a way that's meaningful and applicable and interesting to workplace retirement plans, 401k included. So some years ago, a group found me that was interested in developing something called ESG analytics. I didn't know at the time what that represented, but here's what I've come to understand about ESG. I mention this often, so you probably heard me say this before. There is a predecessor to ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance, by the way. The predecessor, and it's still around, it's called socially responsible investing, and it's perfectly reasonable. There isn't any problem with socially responsible investing. If people have sort of a moral compass, whatever that is, left, right, center, middle, midland, whatever, if you have any kind of a compunction to invest in a certain way or avoid certain companies, then by all means, that's your right and prerogative. But ESG, like a lot of things that have come in and infiltrated with vile tentacles from the far left, from the aggressive globalist left, whatever you want to call them, global communists, I think fits. They take over things and make new terms and rebrand things, and then they just push and insert those things in really horrible, damaging ways. And we've seen it in healthcare, we've seen it in lawfare now, and the takeover of bar associations, and the manipulation, the canceling of media, uh, education for sure. They've come into education full force with all this stuff, loads and loads and loads of this far left wackadoodle, horrible nonsense that just destroys children, education, and childhood, like DEI and CRT and SEL and uh, all kinds of hypersexualized content and stuff, all under the guise of doing good. So the same thing, of course, holds true in the world of finance. So ESG, of course, I came to fairly quickly understand was a nefarious bad thing. And so I severed connections. I had one of those somewhat sort of amicable conversations with the leadership team of that ESG firm that for a brief period, I served an advisory role on an advisory board. By the way, for anybody looking at the work that I'm now doing, that was actually an unpaid role. I never was paid for that. I didn't make any money. I made some introductions and helped them to understand ERISA, which is really kind of my job. I've done that professionally in lots of paid and unpaid ways through many, many years. I try to be generous with my time, and I do a lot of consulting for lots of different types of groups, law firms, accounting firms, etc. So anyway, in that context, there was this group that developed this ESG thing, but that I think had a purpose. I think that was meant to very quickly ramp me up to speed on what ESG is and isn't, how it works, how it's applied, and it gave me kind of maybe a little advanced preview some years ahead of much of the rest of the world. So, as the rest of the world, and I don't mean this in some sort of bragging way, I think it's just timing. The rest of the world is really kind of awakened to the harmful and damaging impacts of ESG and what it portends for us. It's connected to all sorts of other really, really bad things like centralized banking digital currency, which is connected to a social credit score. We're seeing a lot of bad stuff come out of what's called the corporate equity index, which is the corporate equivalent of a social credit score. It's applied to corporations, and it's the club with which these billionaire multinational financial firms beat up on companies to force them to do self-deprecating, damaging, harmful things that harm their own brand, and they're doing that for really vile reasons. So all of this stuff is really bad, and understanding that my background and my focus, my career has been on workplace retirement plans. That has included um, governmental entities. Did some interaction for years with what's called the tax exempt governmental entities group. I did some training in conjunction with the IRS Outreach and Education Program, which trained people on IRS regulations. I did a lot of work in and out of bar associations, teaching and working with lawyers on the legal implications. And I did CPA training for certified public accountants. All this stuff kind of comes together, and having that focus on workplace retirement plans and then adding in that piece that is an understanding of ESG and the harm that it represents, it is with great frustration and I guess some degree of disappointment that I was alerted to a National Pulse article. I'm reading it now. There's a National Pulse article dated, let me see, let me open up this article a little bit here, dated Friday, December 22nd, 2023. And the title of the article from the National Pulse is American Public Pension Funds pour over 68 billion into China in just 3 years. So that tells me something. It tells me we have more work to do. We need to roll up our sleeves and get a better understanding nationally and in the West and globally on the harmful elements of ESG. I'm just going to put it that way because my expectation and my belief, my true belief is that as ESG was being developed and as it was being pushed into the marketplace, we've seen concerted effort for years to try and validate the concept in workplace retirement plans. So I'll tell you a little bit about what that looks like as I've been following that issue really closely, and I'm personally invested in fighting back against any use of ESG in that context. So I want to put this in understandable terms, and then we're going to apply it to workplace retirement plans like pensions and 401k and otherwise. So there, imagine kind of two different worlds in finance. One is personal. One is imagine you have $1 million to invest. Poof, I'm your I've gifted you an imaginary $1 million. If you have a million or more, great, hoorah, more power to you. That's awesome. But for everybody else, just imagine for a moment you got $1 million. You can really, if it's your money and it's not coming to you with any strings attached, like I don't know, it doesn't have a trust document or legal document attached to it or whatever. If it's just your money, you can do whatever you want with it. You can just spend it all. You could buy something frivolous. You could invest it in really harebrained ideas, whatever. You can bet it on gambling, anything, anything you might dream of. You can do with your $1 million. Now, there's another world of finance, and that has to do with you managing somebody else's money. And that's a frequent environment. If you had the same $1 million, but it's not yours, you're entrusted with the responsibility of managing that money and making good, sound decisions on behalf of another person. That is the world that we're in with workplace retirement plans. There are terms that are often attached to that. One is fiduciary. You also hear the term prudent man standard, or I guess in this era, I'm probably supposed to say prudent person. I don't know, but it's the prudent man standard. Uh, those things govern how you must behave. And if you deviate from that and don't really follow the structure and intention of those laws that govern your responsibility over managing somebody else's money, then you can be in big trouble. So enter the world of 401ks and other types of pensions. What we've seen over the last many years and decades is a few things that are creating kind of a perfect storm of badness in the financial world. The first is there used to be a lot of different methodologies to investment management, and different people behaved and thought differently, and there were a lot of small regional local players in that arena. And so if you had a company that was offering a pension, or if you were part of a union and your union went out and got a pension, 401k or 403b, any of those different types of workplace retirement plans, you had lots of different choices about where to go. Well, mass consolidation through many, many decades has put the leadership of all of that into a very select few over time. And to make matters worse and more complicated and more convoluted, many of those big globalist multinational managers and firms have co-ownership. They kind of own parts of each other. And then to make matters even more complicated and a little bit worse even, we have the gradual tearing down of walls that used to exist in different parts of finance. So banking used to be separate from investments, and then insurance used to be separate from investments and banking, but those are all kind of blended together. And then mass consolidation has put the power and management of a lot of that stuff into a select few hands globally. Now, enter your workplace retirement plan. And this is where I really hope that this video gets shared out. Send it to people that you know that are in unions, or that work for employers that offer things like 401k plans. Here's what's happened over many years. And I used to get in trouble for this. At least, what was it, 2009, I had a really bad dust up for writing a big scathing letter that got me in huge trouble because I accused a company where I was working of self-dealing, of manipulating 401k plans for their own personal sales and benefit. That didn't go over very well. There used to be all kinds of nefarious things that have just changed through the years that banks or insurance companies or investment managers will do relative to the huge pots of money in 401k plans. and none of them are good. All of them, virtually all of them, I continue to argue, they do harm to the individual within the plan, and therefore lots and lots of these plans and the way that they're run are actually illegal. And lots of employee groups, and you see it still, you see them pop up now and again. These employee groups form a class. They get a class action lawsuit, they get a good lawyer, and they go back after the plan, and oftentimes they win because bad choices have been made over time. Now, in this setting and knowing these circumstances, I believe what's happening here in this headline, American public pension funds pour over 68 billion into China in just 3 years. The first thing to know is that in my book, well, I absolutely view as compatriots and love those Chinese citizens who want their freedom, and there are a lot of them who do not agree with their government. It's like many of us in the United States right now draw that distinction between we the people and our corrupt government. I believe the same is absolutely true in China. So when I talk about China, I'm talking about the Chinese Communist Party. They're the ones that I have a real problem with, not the Chinese people, the Chinese Communist Party, who lords over and does horribly damaging and abusive things, and for sure is in violation of many human rights laws internationally. Nobody seems to want to talk about it. That's a side note. But when we talk about the impetus for we the people, your union buddy or your teacher pension or the state pension that you get because you work at the library, or the 401k where you go and carve out some of your money to get invested, it's now going through one of just a few places that's this facade. It's this shell of what it used to be on Wall Street, this big, beautiful, glorious looking tower, some glass tower that has almost universally sold out the American people and is in league with these money managers who are anti-American, who are steering our money, our invested dollars, into far left companies and causes, and worse, arguably, than steering simply into far left companies and causes. It's steering into China and sending money into the hands of and control of the Chinese Communist Party. So, what we need to do as a people is share this message, share this information, put on our thinking cap, and I will tell you point blank, that is absolutely why I formed UnWoke. I formed UnWoke.academy. Originally, it was UnWoke investments, UnWoke investing, all of this stuff under the UnWoke to get the message out, to instruct people and get daylight on these issues of the abuse of our monies in investments, and the fact that all this consolidation has really just pushed us into the same, basically the same thing. So there's one other piece to it, and I keep talking about encouraging you. The next time you get a statement from your 401k or wherever it comes from, your IRA account or whatever, if you're feeling great about that big mega Wall Street firm and having their cool looking logo on the corner, know this: the chances of those people at those mega globalist firms actually acting autonomously and independently and fighting the sales narrative within that organization and working exclusively for your benefit are slim. The idea that they can fight back from within and reverse the narrative or fight the sales climate within 401k, if they're working on your company 401k, it's virtually non-existent. It is really difficult to do that in those large organizations because there's so much just twisting of the screws to try and eke out the maximum possible profit. And right now, the profit and the drive and the political atmosphere is pushed so far to the left that those pensions, those IRA accounts, those 529 plans for your kids, those brokerage accounts, even that, so that the sales tools that you see, the virtual things, if you do online trading, everything that I'm seeing right now leans so egregiously left that any idea of funding and providing for we the people and talking about getting money into, for instance, I'm in America, I'm focused on America, but this applies to many nations all over the Europe and the rest of the world. The idea of taking money and applying it toward countries that hold Judeo-Christian values or Western civilization is anathema to where these companies want to take your money. They're taking our money and putting it into horrible causes. They're putting it into things and companies and causes and countries that seem to hate everything we're about. So that's where we need to roll up our sleeves. That's where we need to put on our thinking cap. Share with me. You can redact statements, just blank out your name and account number, all that stuff. Share it with me. You can send it to me at Jonathan at unwokeinvesting.com. Or just find me on social media or whatever. Block out all your personal stuff, but just let's take a look at what's in there. Let me start reporting back to you what I can find on the investments. I already did one big one. I did Procter and Gamble, which is a big company based out of the Cincinnati area, and found how far left leaning their plan was. Let's dissect plans, investments, and start tackling and fighting back against this stuff, because that is how we start to win back. Let's put some daylight on the darkness and start finding where the bad stuff is, where the funneling is coming from that puts $68 billion of our pension from US workers into the hands of the Chinese Communist Party, directly or indirectly. And then we work on finding much better alternatives that feed Western values and Western civilization. I'm Jonathan Broadbent. This has been another episode of Unwoke Academy. Thanks for listening.